for joining us today with the Transition Improvement Grant and all of our panelists. They are here to share some great information on youth apprenticeship programs, how to get students with disabilities involved in this program, career and technical education incentives. The Division of Vocational Rehabilitation is going to share how they've partnered with Youth Apprenticeship to bring this opportunity to students as well. And then also we have Potosi School District with us today that's going to share their experience with Youth Apprenticeship. So thank you to all of the panelists for taking the time to present with us today. I am going to turn this over right away to Darla Burton. Darla is the State Youth Apprenticeship Program Coordinator. She's been working very hard with TIG and around the state to bring us information about youth apprenticeship and has done a really good job of making sure that students in our state have this opportunity as well as students without disabilities. So Darla, if you would like to get started, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking time to join us today. It's a really exciting time in apprenticeship across the state. I'm just going to give you a really quick overview of youth apprenticeship because I think hopefully pretty much everyone has heard about it, but just in case anybody's new or hasn't, I will just hit the high points. And then I'm going to turn it over to our experts from the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation and a school to give you some specifics on how you can use this program with your students in your districts. So youth apprenticeship it's been around for 25 years. It's still the best kept secret in Wisconsin, but word is getting out and as well across the country. We're the oldest one in the country and it's growing leaps and bounds recently. So we've usually stayed at about 1,500 students statewide. This year we had over 5,000. So it's just a tremendous time to be involved in more opportunities than ever.
Reese, do you know how I could get this unmuted? I can't hear this.
Oh, you're not able to hear me?
Christina, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you should see a microphone that says mute.
Well, it says mute down there, but
I took it off.
oh, so it's probably on your screen.
Won't be able to hear you.
Put that right there.
This?
No, this just to minimize it right now. And get out of that one too. Where's your sound on your?
Well, it's down here on the bottom, but it disappeared. If that makes sense.
Okay, so this is a 1 or 2 year program. Students can start as a junior or senior. And if they need 2 years to complete a 1 year program, we can accommodate that if they have an IEP. So for students that may not be able to handle the instruction quite that fast or have fatigue issues with work or whatever, we can typically accommodate those items. So if we prefer to know that up front though, so if you are planning that, just send me an email and we can make a note of that. Also, it's 450 hours a year minimum. Students are paid at least minimum wage. And I know 450 hours sounds like a lot to a student, especially a sophomore, but they can start the summer before their sophomore year and they have until the summer after their senior year to complete. So they really get 3 summers. And those summer hours count as well as hours during the school year. So it averages out to about 10 hours a week, which is usually pretty doable, even if they're in other things, sports and whatnot after school. We like them to still be high school students as well, and the employers know that also. So the related instruction goes along with that job. And what the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation will talk to you about are supports for those things, for the on-the-job training. And then they also have related instruction in the high school or your technical college. And that's determined by your local coordinators. So we leave that up to you, what you have available. Our grant can pay for technical college classes if you don't have things available in your high school. There's a number of ways to do that. So just know there's lots of moving parts with youth apprenticeship. And there are 3 other people like myself at the state. Then we're happy to answer any questions you have after this. Amy Phillips, Jamie Bernthal, and John Keycaver also are available as coordinators as well at the state level. So we also have current incentives through the Department of Public Instruction and with TIG. The career and technical ed incentive grants. Every youth apprenticeship certificate that's completed is eligible for the CTE incentive grants, and those are up to $1,000 per student. And then you have the transition incentive grant as well. That's up to $1,500 per student that has an IEP and continues with education or employment after high school. And I'm not the expert on that grant. I'll leave that to the TIG people, but just know that that's available on top of the CTE grants and the youth apprenticeship grant. So some nice incentives out there for the districts as well. So those are the highlights of the program. It's just, I've worked in the field with youth apprenticeship. I was just recently in a district and I had a student tell me that youth apprenticeship brings the classroom alive for him. You know, I mean, what more do you want than that for students that are looking to the future and working on their careers? So it's just a great way. We see students that have attendance issues. Sometimes this helps. They get it why they need reading and math. I've had more than one teacher tell me that students sometimes with behavior issues, once they're out in the work world, they come back to the classroom and they ask the other students to be quiet because they need to learn this stuff for work. So we just see all kinds of improvements with students. Yeah, it's just the sky is the limit. So this is a way for students to get into college after high school if they'd like. There's just any number of different routes they can go. It fits well with the ACP that you have in your high schools now. So I think that's another reason why we're seeing students driven to youth apprenticeship more than ever. One other thing that I want to mention is that the state has no rules for who can join youth apprenticeship. There's an application in your district. The only thing that we say is that they have to be on track to graduate, and that can look any number of ways: alternative schools, anything that they're working on towards graduation. And our only rule is that a GPA can't be used to rule out students for youth apprenticeship. So if you have any questions about those items, you can also email us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the experts that we have available to you today. And they're going to give you some examples of how this can be used with their services. So
Darla?
we have, yes, oh, I'm sorry. You're gonna...
2 questions. If I think
okay.
we have a few minutes, we can answer these. Please put your questions in the chat and we will answer them as we can to make sure that we're on time. The first one is, if they are doing this in 2 years, can they have the 2 years to work the 450 hours as well?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
If students need to slow down that work due to a disability, we can do that.
Great. If a student has an IEP, do they have to wait until they are 16 to begin?
They do for the youth apprenticeship program, but there is the employability skills certificate that any job qualifies, and they can start when they're 14. So they do have to be 16 for youth apprenticeship, but there's no end limit on that age. So if they're still enrolled in high school as a super senior, or continue at 19, that's fine. But yeah, we do ask that they be 16 to begin, and that's child labor, employment of minors rules.
And we asked Darla to give just a brief overview of youth apprenticeship so that we could also hear from DVR and a local school district or state school district. But we do also have a recorded session on youth apprenticeship on our website under professional development and online learning. So if you want more information about youth apprenticeship, make sure you reach out to Darla, or you can also watch that webinar. Okay. Let's move on then next to Mariah and Tracy.
Hello, hi. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry we're kind of far back. We're in a conference room and this is the most convenient, quiet place for us to speak.
Absolutely. So if you can just share a little bit on who you are and the district you're from, that would be great.
Okay, I'm Mariah Meyer and I am the high school special education teacher at Potosi.
And I am Tracy Brunton and I am the high school ag teacher and the school work coordinator for Potosi.
So do you want us just to go right into it?
That would be wonderful.
Okay, so one of the questions I was asked when we were asked if I would present was, how did we get this started at Potosi for special ed students? And honestly, Tracy and I both started here around the same time, and she and I worked very closely together to get students into the workforce, any students for that matter. So she and I feel like, look at it as to how can we get all students experience in the workforce, not just special ed or non-special ed. And we work closely with Tom Martin, and he's helped us out a bunch and really made it relatively easy to get the program started. Tracy, do you want to talk a little bit about her work experience class? Because that's really the catalyst for the whole way that we make it work is through that class.
So we offer a work experience class here at school. It's offered every semester. It's just a semester class. That class is required for any kid that wants to be leaving school to do a work experience program. The things we cover in there, we do resumes, cover letters, job interviewing, mock interviews with employees from the community. We do career research, college research, proper ways to fill out job applications, and there's some other different things that we touch on too. But that class really allows for the kids to learn more about what youth apprenticeship, work experience, those things are and why they're important and how they could impact them. We've had so I took over this program here in the district about 2.5 years ago. And since then, we've had anywhere from 5 to 10 kids each semester take that class. Not all of them want to leave school to go to work, but there are some that don't leave school to go to work that are still enrolled in the youth apprenticeship program. And we count their hours afternoons, weekends, summertime hours. And that class really works good for us. That is a school board requirement. So that is in our board policy that kids have to take that class to be able to leave the district to go to work.
And I see a couple of the questions, I don't know if they were answered, but for us, students that are leaving to go to work are also getting class credit for that time that they're at work. So they're not missing out on any credits. We just make sure they have their required core credits before they can do the work experience as well. And I don't have like a real magic formula about how to get spec ed kids out in the workforce. I just know that I work with some kids that don't love school, and I wanted to find a way, like Darla had mentioned earlier, that kids are more engaged at school or have a motivator at school, and work a lot of times is that motivator. And if they can get done what they need to get done and leave to go to work, that has been really successful for a lot of kids and really kind of changes their behavior and overall outlook about school. A lot of what Tracy and I have done also in our district is build a network with our local businesses to try to give back in the community and keep kids close, because transportation can be a barrier at times. And that helps a little bit in getting the community more involved and supporting the school. And trying to be very mindful about where we're putting what kids. We want it to be a good fit for the employer, that the employer's kind of going out on a limb for us to help us, so to speak, but it ends up being beneficial for them as well. Initially, it might feel like they're doing us a favor, but in the end, they see the benefit and the advantageous part of it. Another big help from my end, working with special ed students, is having DDR bridge some of the employment gaps. I've had DDR come in and do a skills to pay the bills training with a group of my students, and that has got them excited, feeling more confident about going out into the workforce. Trying to think of other, I've also had some, I can't remember the exact terminology, but paid work experiences where DDR pays for the students to go out into a workforce where the company isn't footing the bill, so to speak, but it gets the student in there, they get to meet the employer, and they get to build a relationship, and it builds a positive relationship that they want to keep the student on after the paid internship is over. Yeah, I guess, can you think of anything else?
I think one of the big things that works really well for us here in Potosi is that every Wednesday our principal runs a grade check.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's one of the big things to make sure that kids are being accountable for what they are doing here in the building to be able to leave to go to work.
Yes.
So every Wednesday I go through and check the grades of the kids that are allowed to leave school to go to work. And if they have a D or an F in a class, they have 1 week from when that grade check was run to be able to better that grade above that D and F status. If they can't or if they don't, they have to stop working immediately. They cannot leave the building until that grade is back up to where it needs to be. They have to call their employer and let them know what's going on and why they're unable to come to work those days. I've never actually had a kid get to that point where they can't leave the building because their grades are not good enough. Most kids, once you come to them on that first Wednesday and say, hey, what's going on in such and such a class, you've got a D right now. If you can't get that grade up by next week, I can't let you go to work. Most of the time, or I should say all of the time, that is a motivator for those kids to say, hey, I got to kick this down or I'm not going to be able to leave to go to work. And that's money that's not going to be in my pocket then. So that is a huge thing for us here to keep those kids accountable.
And I think total, I've had 4 special ed students in the youth apprenticeship, just 1 that's graduated. So I mean, this is only my 4th year of teaching, so I'm still relatively new with it, but it's all been really positive. And if I could give any advice to other teachers is just to try it. Like pick 1 student that you think really wants to go to work and get them started with it. And it's really not a lot involved. I know, Tracy, you will do unannounced visits occasionally, but maybe like what, once a semester or once a quarter?
Yeah, once a semester. It sometimes is more frequent if I feel that there may be issues with a student, but usually once a semester and an unannounced visit to that employer while that student is working is a good thing to do.
Yeah, and that helps keep the students accountable if there's any concerns that they're maybe not going where they're supposed to be going when they leave school. But really we haven't run into much of that at all. I think I can only think of 1 instance where that's been the case, but that didn't last long. I think that's the bulk of what we really wanted to share. I mean, are people able to ask us questions other than on the text board or?
Individuals can unmute and ask a question where we can pull them from the chat, but I believe that all of them have been answered to this point.
Okay, great.
Chat.
Yeah, this is Darla. I think one thing that you mentioned was each student has a mentor on the job, and I think that's just key to youth apprenticeship. So every student in this program, is available statewide, and all of the employers provide a mentor on the job for their students. So somebody to help them, find the break rooms, figure out what they have to do on the job. There's a checklist that goes with every program, and it's specific to that industry. It's industry driven. So it's what the employers want an entry-level person to know when they've had training. So students look at that checklist and think they have to know all that when they enter, and they don't. Those are just things they should be interested in and things they'll be learning on the job. And then those mentors walk them through that, make sure they're learning those things on the job. So they aren't just pushing a broom and changing oil if they're an auto tech. They're doing brakes and transmissions and oil changes and all kinds of things. So that mentor is really key to a student having a good experience and really learning a lot of things while they're on the job. So thanks for mentioning that.
Mariah and Tracy, could you talk about, there's a question about family involvement or a comment. Can you talk about how you got families to be involved? And also, what types of students have you had in youth apprenticeship? Has it only been students with learning disabilities, or is it students with intellectual disabilities, or a combination?
It's a combination. My very first student that I had do youth apprenticeship actually had an intellectual disability, and I would say kind of like we picked their placement, the youth apprenticeship was tailored a little bit to him. He wasn't able to withstand long periods of work. So he was working, I think, 2 or 3 hours initially to get started. So I think his youth apprenticeship was like the 3-summer term that I feel like somebody was talking about earlier, to gain the hours and the experience. But Tom was really helpful in making that work for him, and it actually led to a lot of positive experience for him and allowed the position that he was at, once he left and moved on to other things, that same employer was willing to take on another student from our school who had a learning disability. So they were really open and receptive to working with any of our students. But that's the only example that comes to mind so far. I will have a couple other students coming up that, honestly, students with intellectual disabilities, I feel like this can almost be their niche if you can find the right employment place for them. It all depends on the student though, because I know all of them are different. As far as family involvement, we work with a lot of older students, like usually juniors and seniors are the ones that are taking the work experience class just because of the availability with their core classes. So for me, I meet with their parents generally once a year at least, and this is something we talk about prior to them even entering the class, if this is a route they want to take, if they want to enter the workforce versus going to school, or do they just want to have a part-time job instead of going, or just a part-time job at all, period. And have the parents be a part of the conversation so we know what their expectations are, what they want for the students, as well as what the student wants for themselves. I don't know, do you have any input on your end with students and their families?
I've had conversations with some families, especially during parent-teacher conferences, parents coming in and asking about their child being able to leave to go to work eventually and getting involved in youth apprenticeship program. And then from that point on, it really is just the paperwork end of it, having them fill it out and that kind of thing. Really not much more than that with family involvement in it.
I'm assuming the person that asked the question is worried about, like, if you have families that are resistant to it. Have you run into much of that?
I haven't run into anybody family-wise that has been resistant to their child being involved in the program.
The same for me. Everybody that I've reached out to has been really cooperative, or we already have a relationship kind of formed with that family, so that helps. But we're a pretty small school too, so we know a lot of our parents, fortunately. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yes. Anything else that you would like to share about your experience? Or any other advice you would give to other school districts? Maybe on partnerships that you've created, or how you've found youth apprenticeships, or if there's any agencies involved in that process?
I would say a huge thing is, if you are the spec ed teacher trying to get your kids involved, get with your school to work coordinator in your district. Mariah and I have a great working relationship together, so we take on a lot of sharing of the responsibilities for those kids. She works a lot closer with those kids in terms of what they can handle, what they can't handle, whereas I run a lot more of the paperwork and doing the quarterly assessments and working a little bit more with the employers on that end of things. Also figure out who your schoolwork coordinator person is through your CISA as well. Like we've mentioned a couple times, Tom Martin is ours, and he's been phenomenal to work with, knows the program inside and out. And he's a total supporter of what we are doing in our district. And I think making those connections as well can just help to strengthen your program in general.
And maybe make it feel less overwhelming, like you're not taking on another project. And I think if you start small, like I mentioned before, it makes it feel less daunting, and you can kind of get a better feel for how it will go and what's all involved. Because I know that was something initially, I'm like, okay, so what is this actually? Like, what do we all have to do? So for me, starting with one student who happened to be, he's going into his junior or senior year, excuse me, at the time, it was a perfect time and a perfect fit. So just any way you can try to start, I think is beneficial for kids. It's really a good thing. there's nothing bad to say about it.
How have you found employers to be when you approach them on a youth apprenticeship for a student with a disability?
I'll be honest that a lot of times I don't open with that. I don't always tell them I have a student with a disability that wants to be employed. I'll say I have a student that's looking to work here. They're really excited. They're really interested. And once I kind of get my foot in the door that way, then we talk about some of the needs the student might have, or if DVR is involved, having them be the bridge to that conversation, because I'm always fearful about what people's preconceived notion of disability really means, and focusing more on the parts they can't do versus all that they can do. And I don't want that to be a barrier.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Tracy and Mariah?
I just have one quick question. You guys mentioned that you have used temporary work experiences as a way to kind of start for some of the students. Have you built those relationships with employers still, or has DVR built those relationships, or have you guys kind of shared that responsibility?
It's been a little shared. It's been a mix of both. I mean, I've had connections. I'm a local person from Potosi, so if I know somebody who's looking for kids to work, I mean, obviously I'm always thinking about my students, but I'm also thinking about students that Tracy has, or vice versa. I feel like she's reached out to me to say, oh, I found this placement for a student. But DVR has placed at least one of my students, but he's not actively in a youth apprenticeship yet, but he could be. So it just depends. It doesn't have like a one track that everything kind of flows on. It's a per case, per student situation, really.
Thank you.
I'm seeing a lot of questions regarding DVR as well. So we are going to move on to our next presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions again. I would like to invite David and Kim to present regarding DVR and business services that DVR offers.
All right, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna share my screen. I've never, well, not that screen. Wait, I'm trying to figure out how to do this.
So there's a green box at the bottom of your screen that says share.
Okay, I hit it. Okay, oh, here we go. All right, share screen, let's try that. And then we're going to do this. I can't really see. Oh, there we go. Aha, okay. So yes, so my name is Kim Rasmussen, and I am a vocational rehabilitation counselor advanced based in the Wausau area. So, and just like of note, we adapted this PowerPoint from a PowerPoint previously used. So there'll be a lot of things that we mentioned that aren't in the PowerPoint. And a few things that are mentioned that I think our audience is pretty familiar with already. So I mean, the first couple slides here, I mean, really just talk about the basics of DVR. So I'm not really going to go into that because, as I said, you know, you guys, you know what DVR is about. But we are under the same department as the Bureau of Apprenticeships. So of course we work together. We have the same mission and the same values and visions. So again, not going to really go into that too much. I'll focus on serving individuals with disabilities who want to work. And again, this slide is more about, you know, our role, which I'm sure you're probably aware of, but, you know, my role as a counselor is to prepare the, you know, and work with the job seekers with DVR for today's workforce, you know, helping them realize their employment goals and how to achieve those goals. And then David's role is to, and my role as well, really, is to understand the employer's workforce needs and try to match those up so that we can make sure that we can find the best fit for our participants, our mutual participants. So those first two slides, we pretty much, we know that. So now we're kind of getting into, like, you know, I want to talk about like how DVR can support our students, our transition students, are job seekers, and how we can maybe connect that with apprenticeship. I feel like some of this has been mentioned with the last presentation somewhat, but hopefully I can go into a little bit more depth. But one thing that we do, we work with everybody on the DVR counselor, as well as, potentially we also do have vocational rehabilitation specialists that support us, again, as well as David, and physical specialists. So we do provide career counseling, and also really look a lot at the labor market information and what that local labor market looks like, so that we can provide that consumer informed choice, so that they can, and information, so that they can make a realistic decision. And when they're in high school, really it's about them getting experience. But we try to kind of start that conversation early. So as far as like the skill development, as was mentioned before, we can set up skills to pay the bills training, which goes through communication and teamwork, resolving conflict, and that's in a group setting, as well as like self-advocacy to help prepare our students for that youth apprenticeship, work experience, whatever it may be. And I personally, I like to start that, as soon as possible when they're, sophomores or juniors, so that when we get to, or early junior year, so that when we get to like the potential like work experience or youth apprenticeship, they've got that under their belt. So, but really, I want to talk about the OJT and the work experience. I want to prequel this with, really every student, like we said, they're going to receive individualized services from DVR. So not one size fits all. Some of the services that we have that could be included in their plan to complement the youth apprenticeship could be a work experience, which we also call an internship. So that's where DVR also brings in one of our service providers, one of our job developers that we have an agreement with, and they can work with us on, and the school on finding, the employer, or maybe, the employer's already reached out and setting up like a work experience agreement with them for a certain start date, an end date. DVR pays the wages. I thought that this could be used with youth apprenticeship in a way so that can introduce that student to maybe, not 90 days, but maybe 2 or 4 weeks, or however long they need to kind of get them used to that environment, to see if it's a good fit before they sign on maybe for a youth apprenticeship. And then we're still able to provide like potential, as appropriate, like job coaching or on-site support or off-site support, as they're getting accustomed to that. That's one way that we can help them get started. The other thing is the student on the job training. I find that most useful for like the smaller businesses, the smaller companies. So that's where, either that service provider might, with DVR, or possibly the school, the teacher, the transition coordinator, might mention that to an employer that that's an option if I've said it's an option, but then I will go in or contact the employer and negotiate that. We can couple that with the youth apprenticeship. The thing with that is that, it's other paperwork, other documentation that employer would provide to DVR to get the funds from us. What those are that with the agreement, DVR can fund 100% of the student's wages for up to 500 hours. Of course, we have to calculate that in advance. Sometimes it changes. But with that being said, they actually send us a progress report every 30 days that goes into that student's progress on an agreed upon set of skills or expectations. The student and the employer sign that, and then that's how they get the wages from us. That's how they get reimbursed. So it's another form that they have to fill out, but we try to make it sound as smooth as possible when either like myself or David is going and talking with the employer. So that it's a win-win, I guess, and to really, help that student, get their foot in the door with the employer, also potentially, complete a youth apprenticeship. So some of the other things that could be mentioned would be transportation. For DVR, I mean, that's like a secondary service. So we need to really, I would want to be like at the table, like from the beginning, or at least early on, so that, I mean, all these things can be discussed, including the transportation. Really, that's kind of depending on the local environment. And what we try to do is just ask the family or the student, hopefully they're driving, I don't know, but what can you do first? And then we kind of look at where's the need after that, to see if, we can help supplement that. So I know that's a big one, especially in our rural areas. Finally, another thing is the service and support for that student on the job, whether it's just a straight youth apprenticeship, whether we're doing an on-the-job training. We can provide, like I said before, like a job coach to help them, with learning the tasks of their job. With students, we can also help provide like some soft skill support, those work skills that, they may not have acquired yet. I mean, it wouldn't really take the place of that mentor though. I mean, I feel like that would just be, an additional service that we can provide, maybe to help that mentor or that employer learn how to communicate best with that student, or how they learn. And just really be a supplement to that. So really, these are the things that we can provide to help that student hopefully be successful on the youth apprenticeship that they complete. Again, like I mentioned before, our services don't end at the time of the hire in that youth apprenticeship. I mean, this is just another way for them to gain experience, hopefully in their field of interest. So with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to, and I can answer questions as they come, but over to David, who can talk about how he partners with apprenticeship.
Workforce resource and partners. So what I have here is just a short list of partners. So we have the Job Center Wisconsin and all the other agencies there, Youth Apprenticeship, the ADA Center, Veteran Services, high schools, local workforce development boards, universities, technical schools, DVR service providers. They actually work directly with the clients or the consumers, and also job accommodation network. So what I'm going to talk about today is the importance of partnership and what this can mean for schools, work experience coordinators, apprenticeship program coordinators, and all those folks. Business service consultants can help all of our partners connect to businesses.
David, can I interrupt you for just a moment? There are some people that are having a difficult time hearing you.
Okay. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. So together we can do more. School representatives, apprenticeship professionals, and DVR can work together to inform employers about creative ways to connect to diverse talent, including apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship. Leverage one another's strengths by working together. Consider including DVR on steering or business committees. I know I sit on a few of those YA committees and different types of committees like this. Engage your local DVR business service consultants in outreach efforts to businesses. Business service consultants talk to businesses every day, and you can use your local BSC to help share the youth apprenticeship message. So here's a map of the business service consultants. So there's 9 business service consultants in the state. Each are assigned a region. I cover the North Central region, which is highlighted in red. And you can see those in the areas that you reside in or you work in those contacts. And I can also share that contact information with Pam afterwards, and so she can get those out to you guys. So other ways that business service consultants can help. So we routinely talk and meet with businesses. This is our primary job function. BSCs can identify businesses that would be interested in participating in youth apprenticeship programs. We can also reach out directly to businesses that schools and other partners are interested in working with to help create or explain what youth apprenticeship looks like and how it can be beneficial to those businesses. We do this as part of our business solutions role. Business solutions is a team of outreach individuals from other partner agencies within the job center, and it's typically led by the North Central Wisconsin or the Wisconsin Workforce Development Board. In our region, it's the North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board. These would be businesses that have strong growth and growth in the near future, like businesses like IT or manufacturing. We can also help identify businesses that might not be the best based on local or labor market information and growth of that industry, like retail or medical transcriptionists. Business service consultants have access to business data or labor market information, and we also work with our local regional economists that can help generate that information too. We can always pass that information along as well. Another really important part is being able to get buy-in from businesses who would be a great target sector for youth apprenticeship to expose our youth and preparing them for the future and the future of our economy. Being able to communicate this to businesses and getting them to be interested in growing their own interest by participating in youth apprenticeship. And so the ways that I talk about business, and get them interested in youth apprenticeships, I'm meeting with them trying to educate them on all WIOA initiatives, so Workforce Innovative and Opportunity Act initiatives, starting with DVR, the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. Working with individuals with disabilities, the advantages of working with people with disabilities, the myths about working with people with disabilities, and the incentives that DVR has to offer. I also provide them with information on our WIOA partners like Youth Apprenticeship. I talk about how this can keep local talent local, create interest in these fields by exposing our juniors to these types of opportunities. Also showing how to show the youth different job opportunities that are available to them after graduation. Giving high school graduates an option if they are not interested in continuing on to college. Not to mention a good livable wage after high school. Also explain by getting involved with their high schools and community partners and stakeholders like Youth Apprenticeship, they can use this as a feeder system to continue to grow their businesses in that industry like manufacturing or IT. Often businesses, they think that they can't get involved because they're working with minors and their insurance or law prohibits them from doing things like that. In most cases, that's right, but there are ways to still be involved and provide the same services to the youth, like individuals participating in youth apprenticeship, and grow that industry by being more creative. And what I mean by that is, for example, a minor can't work on a manufacturing floor, but they can be in a maintenance shop or an outbuilding where production's not being performed. They can't drive or operate heavy equipment or forklifts, but they can check in that equipment before the shift starts by checking fluids, belts, just anything on that checklist, even helping with some repairs on the equipment. Just by them helping with those little things can help those operators save time where they could be doing other things, not to mention being a helper for the maintenance techs would provide a lot of knowledge, if they decide to move forward in that path. All while learning and being exposed to a field that they might not have had the chance in creating interest in those fields. Okay. So then I also want to give you a couple of examples, or one example of a couple of businesses in our area that are currently using YA in WDA 6 as, I guess you could call it a feeder system to help meet their needs, even in the economy and the market that we're in today. So there's two businesses in WDA 6 that primarily recruit through youth apprenticeship. They're both CNC machine shops. One has over 80 employees and the other is a little bit smaller, but from a financial standpoint, they do much better than businesses twice their size. And actually, I just earlier today read a news article that the smaller businesses actually putting on an expansion and they're looking to double their workforce this year. And I imagine they're going to do it all through youth apprenticeship like they have been. So a big part of what they do is they partner with their high schools. They donate equipment, scrap metal to the local high schools to help create high school shop courses to help create interest in this field that the schools might not be able to afford to go buy that stuff themselves. They're both part of a larger alliance called SWMA, the Central Wisconsin Metal Manufacturing Alliance. And I'm sure some of you might have heard of that already. Every year they do some type of fundraising. They do a golf outing to raise money to offer to the youth apprenticeship students after they graduate from high school and want to continue in the field. They give them, or they sponsor them and give them a scholarship to get their technical certificates for at local technical schools. And they do this all while working at those businesses, and they're being paid the same time that they're in class and taking those courses. There's no agreement between these businesses and the students either. The businesses offer great wages, working conditions, and incentives that other businesses can't offer. Youth apprenticeship participants graduate, they get their certificates, and they continue working most of the time for that same employer. And this is how these two businesses continue to feed their need while growing in the market that we're in today. I want to say last time I talked with these two businesses over the period of 3 years, I think one of the businesses that I was talking about, they, by using this system, they've only lost 2 of their youth apprentices that decided to go on to a different employer. And actually one moved out of state and the other one just went to a different business. But that's exactly how they're growing, and they don't have all these job openings is by using the youth apprenticeship program. And that's all I had. Any questions?
Thank you, David. We do have a few questions that will be geared probably towards you and Kim.
Okay.
Have you had any students or families that were reluctant to complete a DVR application? And if so, what have you done to support this?
Okay. I guess, in the past, I mean, we do have, well, not in the past, but we do currently have like a potentially eligible.
Kim, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're moving that computer again. We have a potentially eligible process, so I mean, if they are reluctant, I mean, it still requires a signature, but it's less of a process than applying for DVR, going through the eligibility. We have some limitations to that, but we can at least start engaging that consumer and the family in services. They still pay the bills, some other kind of lighter touch things. And I guess through that way, I would hope that I would be able to we would be able to, if they are interested, but yet, again, had been reluctant, maybe they can then proceed with the actual DVR eligibility process and plan. I mean, that's the best way I can answer that, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great answer. I'm not sure that everybody understands what potentially eligible means.
Yep. Well, I mean, so well, I don't have the definition right in front of me, but I mean, the process is that, there has to be at least documentation or the special education instructor signing off that student has a documented disability. So that's step one. And then there is like a 1-2 page referral form for that does get signed by a guardian if the student's under 18. And then they're potentially eligible. So we don't necessarily have to collect the records, but we do need to have some type of verification from the teacher of the school. So in essence, that's what it is. So it allows us to start working with students, maybe in that case or sooner. So.
Yes. So it can provide some of the same services DVR offers. It's just not as intensive as far as getting services and filling out the application for DVR services.
Correct. And I'm honestly, I'd have to check if youth apprenticeship could be one of those. I don't know off the top of my head.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Legally, can the school person tell the prospective employer that the student has a disability, or do you need to coach the student to share that information?
I can take that one.
Okay.
The school would have to have a release of information if they want to discuss that with the employer. Students don't have to disclose that if the disability doesn't affect their work at all. Some people disclose and some people don't. So if they need accommodations or anything, then that's where DVR can come in, and then they might want to disclose that disability and that they do have ways of working around it. So yeah, that would be confidential unless you have a release.
But I don't think she got moved again.
Okay. And are these positions what employers are looking for, or do you carve out new positions for a youth apprenticeship?
I would say that's both. So I used to do placement of students for youth apprenticeship out in the CISA 3 area, and I would start with the job service website. Go on the JobNet and look at who's hiring. And we've added an icon for employers. They can put the apprenticeship icon next to the job if they're hiring apprentices. So that's a great place to start. If you're looking for somebody who is wanting apprentices, you can look on there and see if they have that little icon. And then if you don't find anything in your area for that job, then I would go out and talk to the employer about, that we have a student interested in their industry and the kinds of things that we can provide with the related instruction. So they come with some training, additional training, and we often find that the students bring new life to the employer. They bring new skills, so it's a great way for the employer to learn some things as well. So yeah, you can definitely carve it out or look for openings that are available.
Okay. And if we could step back and look at how does somebody begin the process with youth apprenticeship? So if this would be the first student that they would have that they would like to see become involved or find out more information about youth apprenticeship, where should they start?
Yep, so the first thing you want to do is find your local coordinator. If your high school is involved with youth apprenticeship, then you'll have someone in your high school that's assigned to that as a local coordinator. And if you don't know who that is, you can email me and I can send you that link. Then each high school has an application for students to complete, and those vary locally. So you'll just have to find that application for students, and then it just kind of goes from there. Some schools help the students find the jobs. Some schools require students to find the jobs. So if you have a student that's maybe not capable of doing that, then that's where those extra supports can come in as well. And I just wanted to mention too about the manufacturing. Youth apprenticeship offers some things that aren't available to just high school students on the job. So they're considered student learners, and they are afforded additional things that they can do on the job. And we have a whole list of things for the employer that are allowed and not allowed. So if you have employers that aren't sure about hiring a minor, just contact us and we're happy to help with that as well. Does that make sense? Yeah, so just start locally. If that doesn't work, contact us and we'll connect you with the right person. They typically have to fill out that application, have 3 references. Sometimes attendance is looked at, but again, we don't want GPA to be the final factor. And a lot of times we see attendance improve because if students don't come to school, they can't go to work. So it's that little carrot out in front of them to make everything work for them.
And the reason for Darla to continue to tell you that about GPAs is we have worked with some school districts that was the deciding factor whether a student could be involved in a youth apprenticeship or not, was if they had a certain GPA. And what was found is that when they allowed those students to become a part of the youth apprenticeship, their GPA increased along with attendance and other things because this was a better fit for them to pursue their education than being at their local high schools.
Right, and I just want to educate everyone. We're not out there with a badge or anything, you know, ready to get anyone in trouble, but we just, you know, sometimes things have evolved and people just forget that that's one of the things that we don't allow. But yeah, so just know that that's not the deciding factor for students. This is exactly who it was developed for, those kids in the middle who, you know, maybe just they weren't looking to college, or but a lot of times we see once they're in the job, they realize how much more training they need, and it really spurs lifelong learning for a lot of people.
Great. I don't see any other questions, or I don't think I've missed any of the questions that were asked. If so, could you either please type them in the chat? We have about 5 minutes left. Type them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question yourself as well.
Yes, so I did see one about working side by side with school transition, and it absolutely fits tremendously with your transition program if your high school has one. So, and we're here to help get those things launched too. So if your high school isn't sure how to do that, by all means contact us. And there someone else had asked about the links or the incentives. I kind of whipped through that, and we'll have, I can send out those links as well to the career and technical education incentives and the TIG. So,
Darla, would you want to pull up your slide that says the youth apprenticeship programs, the different strands?
oh, yes.
And then I ask that you please complete the post survey before you leave the webinar as well. That's at the same link, and we'll start to right where you left off, so you'll just need to answer 2 questions.
All right. Did that come up?
No.
No.
So just share your screen at the bottom.
Yeah. Well, I'm not finding it. I had it and it disappeared. Let's see.
Sorry, I put Darla right on the spot.
Well, I had it a second ago. I saw it and I clicked. Oh, there it is. Okay. I don't know, when I hit share, then it just goes to my PowerPoint, but. Okay.
Here it is.
Okay. Ta-da. Yeah, so these are the 11 that the state offers. Your area may or may not offer all of them. So. And we're in the process of updating all of them right now over the next 2 years. All of them will get a facelift and refresh. So we're excited about that.
So there's lots of opportunities in many different career clusters to have students involved in a youth apprenticeship. So please make sure you're making this a consideration as you're planning for a transition for students as well.
Right, there's 55 pathways within those 11 career clusters that students can choose from. And it's growing all the time. So 85% of our students stay with their employers after they complete their youth apprenticeship. So it's a great pipeline into the world of work.
Darla, where can the districts access what career clusters their district offers so that they could hold on to that while they're going through the PTPs?
I will try and bring up the youth apprenticeship website. Is that showing on your screen? Probably not.
Yes, it is.
It is? Okay. So over here on the right-hand side, there's the regional consortiums directory. If you click there, you'll find your school district, and I'll use Appleton just as an example, and you hit go. So you'll see the coordinator contacts there, and then we'll have program areas listed over to the right. So those are the programs that are available in your area.
Great.
Thank
Darla, would you copy that link and put it in the chat?
Sure, to the directory or the whole youth apprenticeship website.
Maybe both.
Okay.
Okay. We are at 4:15. I appreciate everybody joining us today. I think we had about 65 people that registered, so that's great. It's information that we want to make sure and get out to each and every one of you for you to share with your colleagues and all your other educator friends. So again, we appreciate you joining us today. Please remember to do the post survey before you leave. And if you want to stand for a few minutes and put any other questions in the chat, we can make sure and get those answers out to you also. Thank you again to all of our panelists for bringing us all this great information. We also appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.